Think about a time you met someone new. On paper, they were absolutely perfect. They said all the right things. They smiled at the right times, and everyone else seemed to love them. But somewhere deep inside you, a tiny, quiet alarm bell went off. Just a flicker, a slight tightening in your chest, a sudden drop in your stomach, a strange, invisible weight settling over the conversation. You couldn't explain it. If someone asked you what was wrong, you wouldn't have had a logical answer. So, what did you do? If you're like most of us, you pushed that feeling down. You told yourself you were just being paranoid. You smiled, you shook their hand, and you stepped right into the trap. And then, weeks, months, or maybe even years later, when it all fell apart, you looked back at that very first meeting and thought, I knew it from the very first second. Have you ever wondered how you knew? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself how your body knew a truth that your brain didn't have the facts for yet? We call it a gut feeling. We call it intuition. We talk about it like it's magic, like some mystical sixth sense floating in the air. But it's not magic. It's not a superpower. It is data. Cold, hard, lightning-fast data processing. Right now, hiding inside your body is a second brain. It is doing math so incredibly fast that your conscious mind doesn't even know it's happening. And learning how to actually listen to it could be the single most important thing you ever do for your future. But to understand how to trust it, we first have to understand why you keep ignoring it. And to do that, we have to look at what's actually happening behind your eyes when you walk into a room. Because what scientists have discovered about human intuition is going to completely change the way you see yourself. Imagine your brain is a massive trillion-dollar supercomputer. It's sitting in a giant, temperature-controlled room, taking in millions of data points every single second. Every tiny shift in the wind, every micro-expression on a stranger's face, the tone of a voice, the exact way a shadow moves across the floor. This supercomputer sees everything. It records everything. But your conscious mind, the part of you that is you, the part that reads these words and thinks thoughts, is not the supercomputer. Your conscious mind is just a tiny little computer monitor sitting on a desk outside the room. It can only handle about 4 to 50 bits of information per second. That's it. If your conscious mind had to process every single thing happening around you, you would literally collapse from exhaustion in 5 seconds. So, the supercomputer does the heavy lifting. It filters the world for you. When you met that person, the one with the red flags, your conscious mind was busy looking at their nice shoes and listening to their polite words. But the supercomputer was looking at the way their eyes didn't crinkle when they smiled. It noticed that their breathing was out of sync with their words. It scanned its massive database of every single face you have ever seen in your entire life, cross-referenced it with every time you've been lied to, and found a match. It did all of this in less than 40 milliseconds, not slightly behind, not almost there, instantaneous. And then, the supercomputer needed to send a warning to the tiny monitor, but it didn't have time to type out a logical, bullet-pointed email. It didn't have time to explain the math. So instead, it just hit the emergency alarm. It sent a physical sensation directly into your body. A tight chest, a sinking stomach, a sudden urge to back away. That is what intuition is. It is your subconscious mind, having already figured out the puzzle, handing you the final answer. But that brings us to the most frustrating question of all. If your subconscious is this brilliant, lightning-fast supercomputer trying to protect you, why on earth do you argue with it? Why do we stay in the wrong relationship, take the toxic job, or trust the exact person our gut warned us about? Well, that's not the whole answer, because the reason we ignore our intuition reveals a strange, almost tragic flaw in how society has trained us to think. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with logic. From the time you were a kid, you were taught to show your work. You were taught that feelings aren't facts. If you want to make a decision, you need a pros and cons list. You need data. You need proof. So, when your gut screams, danger, but the person standing in front of you is saying, I love you, your conscious mind demands a trial. Your logical brain acts like a lawyer. It says, okay, what is the evidence? Did they do anything wrong? Are they breaking any rules? And you look around and you say, well, no, not technically. I just have a bad vibe. And your logical brain says, a vibe is not evidence. Case dismissed. We ignore our second brain because we can't put a bad vibe on a spreadsheet. We feel guilty for judging someone without proof. We don't want to seem crazy or paranoid or difficult. So we gaslight ourselves. We tell our supercomputer to shut down the alarm. We smile. We say yes when our whole body is screaming no. And here is where it gets even more interesting. Because when you silence that alarm, it doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. And this is where researchers discovered something nobody expected. Your gut isn't just sending you warnings. It is physically keeping score. When we say, trust your gut, we think it's just a metaphor, like having a broken heart. But it's not a metaphor. It is biology. Hidden in the walls of your digestive system is a vast network of neurons, over 100 million of them. It's called the enteric nervous system. It has so many neurons, it can literally operate independently of your head brain. It produces the exact same neurotransmitters, like serotonin and dopamine, that the brain in your skull uses to control your mood. And connecting these two brains is a massive biological highway called the vagus nerve. Think of the vagus nerve like a giant fiber optic cable running straight from your stomach, through your chest, and up into the base of your skull. When your supercomputer detects a red flag, it doesn't just keep that information in your head. It shoots a signal down the fiber optic cable, straight into your actual physical gut. That is why fear makes you nauseous. That is why anxiety gives you butterflies. Your body is literally reading the environment and trying to physically pull you away from danger. But there's a third factor here, and this one is the most uncomfortable and the most emotional truth of all, because sometimes your supercomputer gets hacked. Have you ever wondered why, even when your gut is screaming at you, you still walk right into the fire? Why do we sometimes run back to the exact people who hurt us? Why do we choose chaos over peace? It's because our intuition is a prediction machine. It's trying to keep us safe by predicting the future based on the past. But what if your past was broken? What if you grew up in a house where love was always mixed with chaos? What if your earliest memories of connection involved screaming or silence, or having to earn someone's affection? If that's your data, your supercomputer learns a very tragic equation. It learns that love equals anxiety. So, as an adult, when you meet someone who is actually kind, someone who is consistent and safe, your supercomputer scans the room. It looks for the chaos. It looks for the panic. And when it doesn't find any, the supercomputer gets confused. It sounds a different kind of alarm. It says, "Warning, this is unfamiliar. This is boring. This isn't what love is supposed to feel like. Run." At the exact same time, you might meet someone incredibly toxic, someone who triggers all your old wounds, and your broken supercomputer looks at them and says, "Ah, I recognize this. This is familiar. This is home." This is the hottest part about being human. The devastating conflict between the gut warning you about a threat and your trauma confusing that threat for love. We don't ignore red flags because we are stupid. We ignore them because, for some of us, red flags look exactly like the flag of our hometown. That's either terrifying or liberating, depending on how you hold it, because it means that trusting your gut isn't just about blindly following every feeling you have. It's about learning to tell the difference between the voice of your intuition and the voice of your trauma. So, how do you do it? How do you actually separate the two? How do you know if you're standing in front of a red flag or if you're just standing in front of your own anxiety? It comes down to the frequency of the voice. Anxiety is loud. It is frantic. It loops. Anxiety says, "What if, what if, what if, what if they leave? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" Anxiety feels like a buzzing vibration in your chest. It creates a sense of frantic urgency. You have to fix this right now. But intuition? Intuition is incredibly quiet. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't argue with you. Intuition isn't a frantically buzzing bee. It is a heavy stone dropping into a calm pond. It just says, "No," or it says, "Leave," or it says, "This isn't for you." It doesn't panic. It just delivers the truth, softly and firmly. When you learn to sit in silence, when you learn to stop needing a pros and cons list for every single feeling inside your body, you start to hear that quiet voice again. You start to realize that you don't actually need to wait for the betrayal to know you can't trust them. You don't need to stay in the miserable job until you burn out just to prove you tried hard enough. You are allowed to leave just because it feels wrong. You are allowed to say no just because your body said no first. If you look back on your life, on the times you ignored those red flags, on the times you let the alarm ring until it burned out, please don't be angry at yourself. You weren't being foolish. You were just being human. You were hoping for the best. You wanted the fairy tale, or the dream job, or the perfect friendship so badly that you were willing to ignore the smoke coming under the door. We all do it. But you don't have to do it anymore. You walk through this world with a brilliant, lightning-fast protector inside of you. A second brain that is constantly scanning the horizon, trying to keep you safe, trying to guide you toward the things that are truly meant for you. It remembers everything you've ever learned. It knows your deepest values. It knows the difference between true peace and a beautiful lie. You just have to be brave enough to listen. The next time you walk into a room, or meet a stranger, or face a choice, and that tiny, quiet alarm goes off, don't ask it for proof. Don't put it on trial. Just say, "Thank you," and trust the math. If this video made you think about your own choices in a new way, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore the strangest, most beautiful parts of being human every single week, and I'd love to have you here for the next one. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.